Drill Sergeant Kekstar had trained over 3,000 cadets in his 40-year career with the Galactic Defense Force. He'd broken down the arrogant Andromedan elites, molded soft Centauri civilians into passable soldiers, and even managed to instill basic discipline in notoriously individualistic Rigelians. But as he watched the human cadet jog easily toward the finish line of the endurance gauntlet, his four eyes tracked movement that defied every training protocol he'd ever learned. "Impossible," muttered training coordinator Vaishali, her crystalline form flickering with patterns of disbelief. The simulation logs must be malfunctioning. Cadet Marcus Rivera crossed the final checkpoint with barely elevated breathing, his simple olive-green fatigues showing minimal perspiration, despite having just completed what was designed to be the most grueling week-long survival course in known space. The endurance gauntlet had been specifically calibrated to push even the hardiest species to their absolute limits across 7 standard days of continuous challenges. Rivera had finished it in 57 minutes. "Run diagnostics on all training modules," Kekstar ordered, though he already knew what they would find. He'd been monitoring the human's progress personally, watching through multiple sensor arrays as the seemingly ordinary biped accomplished the impossible. "Diagnostics complete, Drill Sergeant," reported technical specialist this. "All systems functioning within normal parameters. Environmental hazards, obstacle configurations, and physical stressors all operated exactly as designed." Kekstar's mandibles clicked with nervous energy. The endurance gauntlet wasn't just a test, it was a carefully orchestrated nightmare designed to simulate the worst conditions soldiers might face across the galaxy. Crushing gravity fields that increased incrementally from standard to nearly triple intensity. Atmospheric processors that cycled through toxic gas combinations. Temperature variations from Arctic freezing to volcanic heat. Terrain that shifted from impassable swamps to knife-sharp crystal formations. Most cadets required the full week to adapt their biological systems and develop the mental resilience necessary to complete each section. The record holder, a Korthak warrior from a high-gravity Deathworld, had finished in 4 days, and that achievement was still studied in military academies as an example of exceptional genetic adaptation. "Show me the replay," Kekstar commanded. The holographic display materialized, showing Rivera's impossible journey through the gauntlet. In the first section, the Gravity Crucible cadets typically spent 18 hours gradually acclimatizing to the increasing gravitational stress. Rivera had simply jogged through all 5 intensity levels without pause, his gait adjusting automatically to each new stress threshold. "Pause there," ordered coordinator Vaishali. "Analyze his biological readings during the 2.7 transition." The readouts appeared alongside the replay. Heart rate, elevated but stable. Respiratory function, slightly increased efficiency. Muscular strain indicators, minimal. Rivera had adapted to gravity that would have crushed most species, and his body's response suggested the transition was merely mildly inconvenient. "Continue the replay," Kekstar said grimly. The atmospheric challenge came next. Cadets typically required 2 full days to develop tolerance for the rotating chemical hazards, oxygen-depleted environments, methane concentrations, acidic vapors, and noble gas mixtures that induced disorientation. Most species needed specialized breathing apparatus and careful exposure conditioning. Rivera had held his breath for 37 minutes, while solving complex navigation puzzles and maintaining tactical awareness. "That's not possible," whispered technical specialist this. "No oxygen-breathing species can maintain consciousness for that duration under physical stress." "Apparently humans can," Vaishali replied, her crystalline form now cycling through colors that indicated severe anxiety. The replay continued through the thermal variance sector, where temperature swings designed to challenge the most adaptable metabolisms were treated by Rivera as minor weather changes. Through the terrain navigation course, where obstacles meant to require specialized equipment and careful planning were overcome with what appeared to be casual athleticism. The most disturbing section was the psychological endurance phase. The simulations subjected cadets to isolation, sensory deprivation, false information, and stress scenarios designed to break down mental barriers and reveal psychological limitations. Most species required careful monitoring to prevent permanent trauma. Rivera had whistled. Actual musical tones, rendered through vocal cords, while navigating scenarios that typically induced catatonic states in Andromedan shock troops. "Bring up his pre-training psychological evaluation," Kekstar ordered. The files appeared, showing standard psychometric profiles for human military personnel. Rivera registered as slightly above average in stress tolerance, moderately high in adaptability, and possessing adequate problem-solving capabilities. Nothing in his psychological matrix suggested the ability to treat the galaxy's most challenging training regimen as a leisurely stroll through a park. "Drill Sergeant," came a voice from the communications array. "Cadet Rivera is requesting permission to run the course again. He says it was a good warm-up and asks if we have anything more challenging available." The training facility fell silent, except for the hum of environmental systems. Kekstar looked around at his staff, some of the most experienced military instructors in the galaxy, and saw his own realization reflected in their expressions. They had fundamentally misunderstood what humans were. "Sir, technical specialist this," ventured carefully. "Perhaps we should review the intelligence reports on human homeworld conditions." The data files materialized in the holographic display, showing Earth's environmental parameters. As the numbers scrolled past, Kekstar felt something cold settle in his primary digestive chamber. Atmospheric pressure, nearly double galactic standard. Gravitational force, 1.7 times baseline. Temperature variations, extreme by civilized world standards. Atmospheric composition, 21% oxygen, a concentration that would cause hyperoxic seizures in most species. Natural disasters, routine seismic activity, atmospheric storms, periodic bombardment by space debris. "This isn't a colonized world," Vishali said slowly. "This is a natural disaster masquerading as a planet. And humans evolved there," this added. "They didn't adapt to these conditions through technology. They adapted biologically." Kekstar studied Rivera's profile again, understanding dawning like a nightmare. The endurance gauntlet was designed to test the limits of civilized species beings, from stable worlds with predictable climates and manageable gravity. But humans weren't civilized in that sense. They were survivors from a world that tried to kill them daily. The training course that represented the absolute pinnacle of military conditioning was, to a human, merely a mildly interesting approximation of their natural environment. "Coordinator," Kekstar said quietly, "send an urgent communique to GDF Command. Request immediate review of all training protocols for human personnel." What should the message say? Kekstar watched the holographic replay of Rivera casually jogging through challenges that would have hospitalized most of their elite graduates. "Tell them we need to completely redesign our understanding of Deathworld species, and recommend that all human military personnel be classified as special forces, regardless of their actual training, based on one cadet's performance, based on the realization that if Rivera represents average human capability, then we've been vastly underestimating their entire species." Kekstar's voice carried the tone of someone who had just discovered his understanding of reality was fundamentally flawed. If this is what their untrained civilians can accomplish, what does that make their actual soldiers? The question hung in the air as Rivera appeared on the security monitors, apparently doing push-ups while waiting for permission to attempt the course again. The galaxy's military doctrine was about to undergo some very serious revisions.